The Duke of Ravensmere signed the accusation without reading the final page, though his wife begged him to wait until morning. By midnight, Elowen Ashcombe had lost her rooms, her authority, and the workshop that was legally meant to secure her future. Sebastian laid the pen beside the document. Black ink still glistened beneath his name, while 12 witnesses watched from the candlelit drawing room: his solicitor, 2 creditors, the estate steward, the Dowager Duchess, and servants who had attended Elowen for 5 years. Lady Honora Vale stood at Sebastian's right hand, in her plum silk gown, with Elowen's household keys hanging from her waist. She already looked like the mistress of Ravensmere. "This order does not determine guilt," Sebastian said. "It declares that I am suspected of robbing my husband," Elowen replied. "That distinction will be lost before breakfast." A muscle tightened beside his mouth. Once, she had known that movement meant he was troubled. Tonight it meant he had decided to remain troubled, rather than admit he might be wrong. On the table between them lay the evidence: a London dealer's receipt bearing Elowen's name, a page copied from the workshop accounts, and a blue fragment said to have come from the missing sapphire medallion in Ravensmere Chapel's rose window. The medallion had survived 3 centuries, 2 fires, and the soldiers who occupied the estate during the Civil War. Now it had vanished while the chapel was closed for repairs, overseen by Elowen. "You know why I used no estate money for the workshop," she said. "My marriage settlement placed the glassworks in trust. Its accounts are examined separately. Yet the dealer claims you offered him the medallion. A dealer whom no one in this room has questioned. He provided your signature." "He provided an imitation." Sebastian looked toward the creditors. Ravensmere owed them nearly £14,000, and payment fell due within 7 days. Elowen understood the fear behind his decision. She also understood that fear did not move his hand across the paper. He had done that himself. "Let me examine the chapel frame," she said. 1 hour in daylight. My father taught me to read cut glass before I could write my own name. Honora touched Sebastian's sleeve. "The Duchess has already had ample opportunity to alter the evidence." Elowen turned toward her. "You entered the kiln room 3 nights ago, to search for what you had stolen. With whose permission?" "Mine," Sebastian said. The answer struck more deeply than the accusation. The kiln room contained Elowen's formulas, tools, and experimental batches, the only work in Ravensmere that had remained exclusively hers. Sebastian pushed the signed order toward his solicitor. "Elowen, until the creditor's hearing, you will reside at the West Dower House. Mrs. Bell and 1 maid may accompany you. You will surrender your keys and abstain from all contact with the workshop women. And if I refuse?" His grey eyes met hers at last. "Then I shall ask the magistrate to place formal restrictions upon you." The room became perfectly still. Elowen removed the silver chatelaine from her waist. 5 years of authority hung from it: linen presses, medicine cupboards, storerooms, household accounts, and the private entrance to the chapel. She placed it on the table, without allowing the keys to tremble. "The glassworks key is held by my trustees," she said. "You cannot lawfully take it through a household order." Honora's pleasant expression faltered. Sebastian had not read that part either. "You have until noon tomorrow to depart," he said. Elowen looked at the man she had married, searching for one remnant of the husband who had once spent an entire winter helping her turn an abandoned orangery into a workshop. She found regret, but no courage. "Do not call this necessity," she said quietly. "Necessity did not prevent you from listening. You chose not to." She walked from the drawing room beneath the frightened eyes of the servants. Nobody followed until she reached the entrance hall. Elowen, Dowager Duchess Octavia, emerged from the shadows beside the staircase. Her silver hair was arranged as severely as ever, but one bare hand was closed tightly around something. "I shall not ask you to forgive my son," Octavia whispered. "I shall ask you to survive him." She pressed a broken cobalt bead into Elowen's palm. "This fell from Honora's traveling case yesterday." Elowen carried it beneath the hall chandelier. The tiny bead was blue at its center, but where candlelight passed through its broken edge, the color faded toward a sickly violet. Her breath stopped. She had made that glass herself, a failed batch containing too much manganese. Only 6 pieces had existed. Elowen had buried all of them behind the workshop kiln because sunlight changed their color within hours. The fragment presented as ancient sapphire glass would change as well. Someone had entered her kiln room, recovered the discarded batch, and manufactured evidence before the medallion was reported missing. But framing Elowen was not the final purpose. Removing her gave Honora control of the chapel, the household, and access to every room scheduled for inspection by the creditors. Then Elowen remembered the heavy iron crates she had seen beside the chapel that morning. They had not been brought there to repair the window. They had been brought to carry it away. The crates had been brought to carry the window away. Elowen closed her fingers around the cobalt bead before anyone crossing the entrance hall could see it, then looked toward the east passage leading to the chapel. She could not reach the doors without passing 2 footmen, and Giles Morrow, the estate steward, who now stood beneath the arch with Honora's written instructions in his hand. To challenge them openly would give Sebastian reason to summon the magistrate before she had secured anything that could survive another accusation. "Come, Your Grace," Mrs. Bell murmured beside her. The older woman had served as Elowen's dresser since the wedding, but before age stiffened her hands, she had spent 20 years mixing lime and fitting lead beside her mason husband. She neither asked what Octavia had given Elowen, nor offered comfort that would insult them both. She simply placed herself between Elowen and Morrow and escorted her upstairs. The Duchess's rooms were already being dismantled. 2 maids folded sea-green gowns into trunks, while another removed Elowen's books from the escritoire. A fire still burned in the grate, though Honora had ordered the candles counted and the silver dressing set inventoried. Elowen crossed to a cabinet, concealed behind the bed curtains, and found its lock scratched but unopened. Inside lay 3 workshop wage books, correspondence from Birmingham suppliers, and the lease signed when Sebastian had allowed her to convert the ruined orangery into a glasshouse. 5 years earlier, Ravensmere had possessed 40 broken windows and debts to every glazier in the county. Elowen had repaired 31 windows without charging the estate for her labor, restored the chapel's southern panels, and trained 32 widows and laborers' daughters to cut simple quarry glass. Their workshop had earned £1,100 in the previous year. More than half had been spent locally on sand, charcoal, food, and wages. Yet the lease contained a provision Sebastian's late solicitor had insisted upon. If the furnaces remained cold for 14 consecutive days, the premises and fixed equipment reverted to the Ravensmere estate. Elowen had accepted the clause because she had never imagined her husband would become the person who used it against her. "Honora will keep the women outside until the fires fail," she said. "Then she will claim the glasshouse for the creditors." Mrs. Bell stopped folding. "The kiln can hold its heat 3 days if no one opens it. 4, if Ruth damped the lower vent before they expelled her." Elowen took a sheet of paper and wrote 2 sentences authorizing her trustees to demand immediate access under the settlement. She sanded the ink, sealed the message with Mrs. Bell's plain sewing wax, and addressed it to Mr. Nathaniel Shaw in York. "Give this only to Daniel Price," she said. "He has carried workshop orders for 2 years, and he is not employed by the estate." Mrs. Bell tucked the letter beneath her apron. "If His Grace asks whether you sent it, tell him the truth. My husband may confine me to another house. He will not make liars of the people who remain loyal to me." That was her first boundary, and speaking it steadied something inside her. She then placed the cobalt bead on the window ledge, where the earliest grey light touched it. Within minutes, the rich blue began bleeding into violet around the broken edge. Mrs. Bell stared. The chapel glass never does that. Because it was made before manganese was commonly used to clear inferior sand, this came from my kiln. Elowen wrapped the bead in black paper and sealed it inside a small wooden needle case. The object now had 2 witnesses to its condition and origin. It was not enough to clear her, but it was more than she had possessed downstairs. A knock sounded, and Morrow entered without waiting for permission. Lady Honora requires the workshop books. Lady Honora has no authority over property held by my trustees. His Grace has given her authority over the household. Then she may count the sheets and inspect the sugar. These books do not belong to the household. Morrow's gaze shifted toward the cabinet. He had always been a careful man, deferential without warmth, but now Elowen noticed a black crescent beneath his thumbnail, the stain left by handling fresh glazing putty mixed with lamp soot. Estate stewards did not fit windows. His Grace will hear of your refusal, he said. For once, Mr. Morrow, I hope he hears my words exactly. When he had gone, Elowen opened the copied receipt she had quietly taken from the evidence table while surrendering her keys. The supposed London dealer described purchasing a circular sapphire medallion 14 inches across and weighing 6 pounds. Elowen went to the portfolio containing the chapel survey completed the previous autumn. The central medallion was not circular. It was an 8-pointed star, 22 inches from tip to tip, secured within an iron saddle bar, and too heavy for one man to remove intact. The receipt did not describe the missing Ravensmere glass at all. It described the modern imitation manufactured from her discarded batch. Honora's evidence could survive only if the true medallion vanished before anyone compared the two, and Elowen had just been ordered away from the chapel while iron crates waited outside its doors. Honora's evidence could survive only if the true medallion vanished before anyone compared the two, and Elowen had just been ordered away from the chapel while iron crates waited outside its doors. She folded the false receipt inside the chapel survey and placed both beneath the lining of her smallest trunk. At 11 the next morning, she descended the front staircase, wearing a dark teal traveling gown and carrying nothing in her hands except the sealed needle case containing the cobalt bead. Honora waited in the hall, with the household keys displayed at her waist, while Sebastian stood beside the open front door, as if duty required him to witness his wife's removal. Beyond him, 4 labourers were carrying the first iron crate into the chapel passage. "Those men are not masons," Elowen said. Honora smiled. "Mr. Morrow engaged specialists from York to make the window safe. A glazier carries grozing irons, lead knives, and boards padded with felt. Those men have crowbars." Sebastian glanced toward the labourers. One quickly lowered the iron bar he had been holding across his shoulder. The contradiction reached Sebastian. Elowen saw it in the brief narrowing of his eyes. Then Morrow stepped forward with a folded work order. "The central frame is corroded, Your Grace. Lady Honora has authorized its removal before it injures someone." "Upon whose examination?" Elowen asked. "Mine. You are an estate steward, not a glazier, and you are under accusation for stealing the very object you now insist upon guarding." Sebastian took the work order, read only the upper paragraph, and returned it. "No glass is to leave the estate before the creditor's hearing." Relief touched Elowen for less than a breath. "The frame may be removed for safety," he continued, "provided the pieces are secured in the chapel crypt." Honora inclined her head. The concession sounded reasonable, which made it more dangerous. Once dismantled, ancient glass could be exchanged piece by piece, and no creditor would know what he was seeing. "The receipt describes a circular medallion 14 inches wide," Elowen said. "The Ravensmere medallion is an 8-pointed star measuring 22 inches. Your own surveyor signed those dimensions last September." Sebastian looked at her sharply. Honora answered before he could. "A London clerk may have estimated poorly. By 8 inches? And mistaken a star for a circle? You are experienced in creating explanations." Elowen kept her gaze upon her husband. "1 hour, Sebastian. Let us open the chapel together. Compare the window with the fragment, and settle what can be settled. For an instant she believed he might agree. Then the sound of carriage wheels swept across the courtyard, and Daniel Price climbed down holding a leather dispatch case. Honora's composure altered. Not enough for Sebastian to notice, but enough for Elowen. Daniel bowed and handed Sebastian a letter bearing the seal of Nathaniel Shaw, senior trustee of Elowen's marriage settlement. The notice stated that the workshop's furnaces, tools, records, and finished stock were trust property. No household officer could seize them, dismiss the workers, or obstruct access without risking an action in chancery and personal liability for resulting losses. Sebastian read every line of that letter. "Did you send for this?" he asked Elowen. "I informed my trustee that his property was threatened. You acted before leaving my house. I acted because you gave my authority to a woman who entered my kiln room and brought crowbars to your chapel." Honora's fingers closed around the keys. "This is insubordination disguised as prudence." "No," Elowen said. "It is the difference between what belongs to Ravensmere and what Ravensmere merely believed it could take from me." Sebastian's face hardened, but he turned to Morrow. "The glass house is to reopen immediately. The workers are to be admitted, and nothing within it is to be removed." It was a small victory, yet Elowen saw its effect. Honora had expected the furnaces to cool. Now they would remain alive, preserving both the lease and whatever traces the intruder had left behind. Mrs. Bell entered the waiting carriage. Elowen followed, but as she placed her foot on the step, something beneath the nearest iron crate caught the light. It was an ordinary wooden packing tally, no longer than her thumb, tied to the handle with blue and white twine. A number had been burned into its face, H17. Elowen had seen that exact twine and numbering system before, on crates carrying imported cobalt from the Hull warehouse of Mercer and Blythe. Her workshop had stopped using that firm 8 months earlier because several shipments arrived underweight. Honora noticed where she was looking. Without turning her head, she told one of the laborers, "Remove those labels before the crates enter the family chapel." The man tore away the tally and dropped it into his coat pocket, but a short length of blue and white twine remained trapped beneath the iron hinge. Sebastian looked from Honora to the crate. "Why must the labels be removed?" "Because shipping marks are ugly," she answered lightly. He accepted the explanation, or chose to appear to. The carriage began to move. Through the rear window, Elowen watched Honora lift the chapel key and send the crowbar men inside. Then Honora turned toward the departing carriage, no triumph left in her face. She knew Elowen had recognized the tally, and before the gates closed between them, she gave Morrow a quiet order that Elowen could not hear. Morrow immediately mounted a horse and took the northern road, the road leading not to York, but to Hull. Morrow immediately mounted a horse and took the northern road, the road leading not to York, but to Hull. Elowen watched until the carriage turned behind the lime trees, then leaned forward and called to the coachman, "Take us to the Dower House, by way of the West Field." The change would not allow her to overtake Morrow, but it would bring the carriage within sight of the glass house. 10 minutes later, a column of black smoke rose above the abandoned orangery. It did not curl from the chimney as furnace smoke should. It forced itself through the roof vents in heavy, uneven bursts. 3 women ran into the yard coughing, while another beat upon the locked side door. Elowen opened the carriage door before it stopped moving. "Your Grace." "His Grace forbade contact with the workers," Mrs. Bell warned. "He forbade conversation. He did not order me to watch them suffocate." Elowen gathered her skirts and crossed the muddy field at a run. Ruth Calder, the workshop forewoman, met her near the water trough, with soot streaked across her face. "The annealing furnace will not draw," Ruth gasped. "We opened the upper vent, but the smoke worsened. Agnes is still inside." Elowen pressed the back of her fingers against the brick beside the furnace entrance. The heat was concentrated too low. Someone had blocked the main flue while the overnight batch remained inside, trapping both smoke and furnace gases. If the women opened the iron door, the sudden air could turn the chamber into a blast furnace. "Nobody touches that latch," Elowen ordered. She wrapped a wet apron around her mouth, dropped to her hands and knees, and entered beneath the smoke. Visibility vanished after 3 yards. She followed the wall by touch until she found Agnes Wren collapsed near the cutting benches. Elowen dragged the woman toward the door, while her lungs burned and sparks from the roof vent fell across her sleeves. Ruth and Mrs. Bell pulled them into the yard. "The batch is lost," one worker cried, as Elowen forced herself upright. Not yet. Her father had taught her that a furnace spoke through pressure before it spoke through flame. The rhythmic thud beneath the floor meant the trapped heat was seeking the old ash channel, sealed when the orangery became a workshop. Elowen seized a mason's hammer, counted 6 bricks from the western corner, and struck the mortar joint rather than the brick face. On the 4th blow, the joint cracked. On the 7th, hot smoke burst through the opening and rolled across the empty yard instead of back into the building. The chimney drew with a roar. Elowen's right palm blistered against the hammer handle, but the pressure inside the furnace began to fall. Within minutes, the remaining women emerged safely, and even the sheets of ruby glass inside the annealing chamber could still be saved. Hooves sounded from the estate road. Honora arrived first with Sebastian behind her, and a wagon carrying water barrels. She surveyed the coughing women, the broken wall, and Elowen standing in the mud with her burned hand wrapped in Mrs. Bell's handkerchief. "Thank heaven my warning reached the house in time," Honora announced, loudly enough for the gathered villagers to hear. Another quarter hour, and the duchess's neglected furnace might have killed them all. Ruth stepped forward. Her grace did not neglect it. She saved Agnes and opened the old ash channel. After entering a workshop from which she had been lawfully suspended, Honora replied, "And after ordering the women to keep a dangerous furnace burning to preserve her lease." Sebastian dismounted. His gaze moved from Elowen's scorched sleeve to Agnes sitting beside the trough. "Did you instruct them to maintain the furnace?" "I instructed no one after your order," Elowen said. "Someone sealed the main flue with fresh brick during the night." She led him to the rear wall. The mortar around the blocked opening was still pale and damp. Pressed into it was the narrow double groove left by a steward's folding rule, the same sort of rule Morrow carried in his coat. Sebastian crouched and touched the mortar. Honora did not approach. "This proves only that a repair was attempted badly," she said. "Then ask who authorized it," Elowen answered. Ruth looked from Honora to Sebastian, fear tightening her face. Elowen understood that the women's wages, cottages, and husbands' tenancies all depended upon Ravensmere. To force Ruth to speak there would make her bear the cost of Elowen's defense. "No," Elowen said before Sebastian could question her. "The workers will not be examined in the yard while Lady Honora controls their employment. If you want their testimony, provide written protection against dismissal and eviction." "You impose conditions while accused of theft?" Sebastian asked. "I protect people while you decide whether they are useful to you." Honora turned the rescue into public defiance before the water wagon had even been unloaded. She ordered the villagers away, claimed authority for reopening the workshop, and instructed a clerk to record that Elowen's unauthorized intervention had damaged estate masonry. Elowen did not argue. Instead, she placed the sealed needle case containing the cobalt bead into Daniel Price's hands in the presence of Mrs. Bell and Ruth. She wrote one instruction beneath the signatures of all 3 witnesses. Place the bead beside the fragment used as evidence. Expose both to direct sunlight for 20 minutes and record any change in color. Deliver this to the Duke, she told Daniel, not to his steward, not to Lady Honora, and not to his solicitor. Put it into Sebastian's hand. Daniel crossed the yard and did exactly that. Sebastian read the instruction, looked at the morning sun breaking through the smoke, and then glanced toward the iron evidence box waiting in his carriage. For the first time, Elowen had given him a test requiring no trust in her word. Only 20 minutes, and the willingness to open the box. For the first time, Elowen had given him a test requiring no trust in her word, only 20 minutes and the willingness to open the box. Sebastian held the needle case in one hand and looked toward the iron evidence chest in his carriage. "Do it here," Elowen said. "Let Daniel open my case. Let your solicitor open the chest. Place both pieces on the same white cloth, and no one need touch them again." Honora descended from her horse. The fragment is evidence in an accusation against her. Exposing it to some chemical effect she claims to understand could alter it beyond recognition. "Sunlight is not a chemical trick," Elowen replied. "Then why did you bury the original batch?" Sebastian asked. "Because its color was unstable and therefore useless for commissioned work, or because you intended to use it for something that could not be traced." The words silenced even Honora. Elowen studied her husband's face and understood that he had already chosen the answer that frightened him least. If the evidence were false, then he had condemned his wife publicly, surrendered her authority to the woman who framed her, and allowed saboteurs into his estate. If Elowen were guilty, he remained merely a deceived husband, acting to save Ravensmere. Pride had made innocence more costly for him than guilt. 20 minutes, she repeated. "That is all truth requires of you." Sebastian placed the sealed needle case inside the evidence chest, without opening either object. "The materials will be examined by an independent man in Hull." "Chosen by whom?" "Mercer and Blythe have secured an assessor." Elowen felt the air leave her lungs. The same warehouse whose blue and white twine hung from Honora's crates would now authenticate the glass those crates were built to carry. "Mercer and Blythe supplied the cobalt used in my failed batch," she said. "They cannot be independent." Honora produced a document from her reticule. "They are also prepared to advance £6,000 against the chapel collection and other unentailed contents until the creditor's hearing. Without that sum, wages and interest payments will fail on Friday." Sebastian took the document. Elowen saw 3 seals already affixed beneath the final paragraph, leaving only the Duke's signature blank. "You arranged a loan before the medallion was reported missing," she said. Honora's eyes sharpened. "I arranged protection when I realized how badly you had managed matters. The glass house earned £1,100 last year, and Ravensmere owes 14,000. Debts accumulated before our marriage, while Morrow controlled the estate accounts." Sebastian's expression hardened. "Enough." Ruth stood with the other workshop women near the broken ash channel. Her lips parted, and for one hopeful instant, Elowen thought she would reveal who had approached the furnace during the night. Then Ruth looked toward the row of estate cottages beyond the field, where her 2 children lived under a tenancy Morrow could terminate. She lowered her eyes. Elowen did not blame her. That silence belonged to the people who had made truth dangerous. Sebastian carried the loan authorization to the water wagon and used its wooden side as a writing table. Elowen crossed the yard and caught his wrist before the pen touched paper. It was the first time she had touched him since the accusation. His pulse beat hard beneath her fingers. "If you sign, Honora may remove the chapel glass, place it in Mercer and Blythe's custody, and carry it beyond Ravensmere before any magistrate sees it. The agreement requires an inventory, prepared by Morrow and witnessed by Honora. You name the conspirators as safeguards." Pain flashed across his face, followed by anger because she had seen it. "You no longer possess authority to interfere. I am not speaking as your duchess. I am speaking as the only trained glazier present. Remove the saddle bars before the outer lancets are braced, and the upper stonework may shift. Take the window apart in haste, and you will endanger the chapel itself. The assessor will supervise. The assessor is in Hull. The crowbars are here." Sebastian pulled his wrist free. "You have used your knowledge to contradict every person charged with saving this estate, because every one of them is wrong, or because knowledge has taught you that no one can challenge you." He signed. The scratch of the pen was quieter than the furnace, quieter than the horses shifting in the yard. Yet Elowen heard in it the end of something she had spent 5 years trying to preserve. Sebastian handed the authorization to Honora. It granted her immediate custody of the chapel glass, the evidence chest, and all associated surveys for transport to Mercer and Blythe's bonded warehouse. It also barred Elowen from Ravensmere's principal grounds until the creditors' hearing, and empowered the estate constable to remove her if she returned. Honora folded the document without triumph. She was too intelligent to celebrate before the work was complete. Elowen turned to the workshop women. "Your wages will be met by the trust even if the estate closes these doors," she said. "Do not risk your homes by defending me. Record what you see. Remember who gives each order, and sign nothing you have not read." Her goal was no longer to persuade Sebastian to become the husband she remembered. It was to keep Honora from destroying the women, the workshop, and the evidence, while Sebastian learned the price of preferring accusation to doubt. Elowen returned to the dower house under the estate constable's escort. Shortly after midnight, iron-rimmed wheels woke her. From the attic window, she saw 3 covered wagons leave the chapel yard without lamps. Blue and white twine flashed pale beneath the moon, binding crates much larger than any single medallion required. The final wagon carried the iron evidence chest, and behind it, through the open chapel doors, Elowen could see an empty black wound where the entire rose window had stood. Through the open chapel doors, Elowen could see an empty black wound where the entire rose window had stood. She sent Daniel Price after the wagons, with strict instructions not to confront anyone, then dressed and waited beside the attic window while Mrs. Bell lit every candle in the dower house. Shortly before dawn, a sound deeper than thunder rolled across Ravensmere. The chapel's western gable folded inward. Stone tracery crashed through the roof. The bell began ringing without a hand upon its rope, and servants poured from the main house carrying lanterns. Elowen was already running when the estate constable intercepted her at the field gate. "His Grace's order forbids you from entering. Then arrest me after we know no one is buried beneath that roof." She stepped around him. The constable reached for her arm, but Mrs. Bell struck his hand with her wooden walking stick, and the 2 women continued toward the chapel. One of Honora's labourers lay trapped beneath a fallen timber near the nave entrance. Sebastian and 3 footmen were trying to lift it, but every movement sent pebbles raining from the fractured arch above them. "Stop," Elowen shouted. Sebastian looked at her with dust whitening his dark coat. "Get out. The wall is coming down. It will come down if you lift that beam. It is carrying the weight that the saddle bars carried yesterday." She pointed to a stone pier leaning inward beside the ruined window. Without the iron framework tying the outer masonry together, the roof thrust had forced the wall apart. No command from a duke could reverse the geometry. "Bring 2 carriage jacks," Elowen ordered. "Set them beneath the beam before anyone moves it. Rope the pier to the yew tree, and nobody stands beneath the bell frame." Sebastian hesitated only once, then repeated her orders. The jacks raised the timber by inches. Elowen crawled beneath it, ignoring the pain in her blistered hand, and fastened a rope around the labourer's chest. They dragged him free moments before a section of plaster collapsed across the place where his head had rested. He was alive, his leg broken but his breathing steady. Elowen remained on her knees beside him until the surgeon arrived. She did not look at Sebastian when he said, "You saved him. I prevented your authorization from killing him," she replied. Honora came through the smoke-colored dawn with 2 servants behind her. The removal crew exceeded its instructions. "I ordered them to take only the loose panels. Your document granted custody of the entire window," Elowen said. "My husband signed it after I told him precisely what would happen." Sebastian flinched, not because the accusation was cruel, but because broken stones surrounded its proof. A creditor named Mr. Harland arrived from the main house carrying the agreement. "Your Grace, the collateral described here no longer remains upon the estate. Until Mercer and Blythe confirm receipt, the advance cannot be recognized. Without it, our committee will attach the unentailed rents at noon." Sebastian stared at the paper. "The crates are under my signed authority. They are under Lady Honora's custody, Harland corrected. That distinction has become expensive. The chapel bell gave another broken toll, and a crack opened above the family memorials. Sebastian ordered everyone out, but no mason would enter to brace the wall. The estate carpenters had never worked upon medieval tracery, while the men who dismantled the window had vanished with the wagons. Ravensmere had lost both the object pledged for the loan and the only person capable of explaining how its removal had damaged the building. Sebastian turned to Elowen. "Can the wall be saved?" "Yes, but not by this morning, and not while anyone pretends the window was removed safely. Tell me what you require." "Written protection for every workshop employee who gives evidence. No loss of wages, cottage, fuel allowance, or tenancy, until the magistrate has heard them." Honora objected at once. "She is bargaining with the safety of your chapel." "No," Elowen said. "I have already protected the people inside it. I am bargaining for those you frightened into silence." Sebastian signed the protection before the surgeon finished setting the laborer's leg. Ruth Calder came to Elowen at the edge of the graveyard as soon as she saw the Duke's seal upon it. Her hands shook so violently that Mrs. Bell covered them with her own. "Morrow bricked the furnace flue," Ruth whispered. "I saw him after midnight. He told me Lady Honora would close the workshop and pay us a month's wages if I kept quiet. When I refused, he said my children would be turned from their cottage before Sunday." "Will you say that before a magistrate?" Elowen asked. Ruth looked at the written protection and nodded. "There is more. He took a sack from behind the kiln, the place where you buried the failed blue glass. He gave it to one of the men with the iron crates." Ruth had now connected Morrow to the false fragment, without knowing how valuable her observation was. Elowen asked Mrs. Bell to escort her to the dower house and keep the signed protection with them. She would not leave a witness under Honora's roof. By mid-morning, Sebastian learned that orders could no longer retrieve what his signature had released. Riders sent north found no wagons on the Hull road. The toll-keeper at Beverley reported that 3 covered carts bearing Ravensmere papers had turned east toward the river 2 hours before dawn. Honora claimed Morrow had changed the route to avoid damaged roads, but she could produce no new destination. Then Daniel returned, his horse white with foam and a torn length of blue and white twine wrapped around his wrist. He had followed the convoy as far as Blackwater Quay, where the crates were transferred onto a river barge registered to Blythe alone. The barge would reach Hull by evening. A Dutch brig named the Vesper was scheduled to sail on the midnight tide, and its manifest already listed 3 crates of English ecclesiastical glass. Elowen looked toward the shattered chapel, then at Sebastian holding the authorization that had made the shipment lawful at every gate between Ravensmere and the sea. They had less than 18 hours to stop the window from leaving England, and Honora still possessed the only signed inventory of what the crates were supposed to contain. They had less than 18 hours to stop the window from leaving England, and Honora still possessed the only signed inventory of what the crates were supposed to contain. Elowen returned to the dower house and turned its neglected dining room into a place of command. Ruth remained upstairs with Mrs. Bell. Daniel marked the river route upon an estate map, and 2 workshop women copied Ruth's statement so that no single page could erase her testimony. Sebastian entered without servants and placed his sealed revocation upon the table. "This cancels Honora's authority over the shipment." "It cancels it after the crates have passed into Blythe's custody," Elowen said. "We need proof that the transfer began as fraud, not merely that you regret permitting it." His jaw tightened. "What do you require?" "A signed admission that you refused the sunlight test, authorized removal after I warned you of the structural danger, and gave Honora custody without examining her inventory. That statement will place responsibility for the collapse upon me. It belongs upon you." He stood silent long enough for the clock to strike once. Then he sat and wrote. Elowen added 2 conditions. Sebastian would issue no order directly to Ruth or any workshop witness, and any expense advanced from Elowen's trust would become a debt owed to the trust rather than a gift to Ravensmere. "You believe I would take your money after accusing you of theft?" he asked. "You took my authority, I no longer rely upon what you believe yourself incapable of doing. He signed both conditions. Daniel opened Elowen's wage books to calculate the available funds, and Sebastian saw columns he had never read. Roof glass repaired without estate charge, winter coal purchased for tenant cottages, interest paid twice when Morrow claimed rents had arrived late. You covered the March payment, he said. The workshop lent Ravensmere £800 over 3 years. Every sum is recorded. Why did you never tell me? I placed the accounts on your desk every quarter. He had not opened them, because Morrow summarized household matters for him. Recognition entered Sebastian slowly and without absolution. Elowen closed the book before remorse could become a request she had no wish to hear. They departed within the hour in 2 carriages, changing horses at Beverley and reaching Hull as evening light spread across the Humber. Sebastian's title gained them entry to Mercer and Blythe's bonded warehouse. Elowen's written conditions kept him from taking command once they were inside. 3 iron crates stood beneath a loading crane, each marked H17 and bound in blue and white twine. The Vesper waited beyond the quay, with her sails furled and smoke drifting from the cookhouse chimney. A customs examiner named Mr. Josiah Fenwick witnessed Sebastian revoke the export authority. Blythe was absent, and Morrow could not be found. Open the first crate, Elowen said. The warehouse men lifted its lid. Beneath layers of felt lay fragments of Ravensmere's outer lancets, their medieval reds and greens cut from the chapel frame with such haste that old lead still clung to their edges. Sebastian reached toward one panel. Do not touch it, Elowen warned. Your hands would break the last record of how it was removed. Using padded tongs, she lifted a loose blue corner, no larger than a coin. Ancient glass was never perfectly smooth. It carried tiny seeds from the furnace, fine striations from being opened into a sheet, and weathering that entered the surface rather than sitting upon it. The fragment bore all 3. Fenwick watched her place it inside a folded packet, seal it with her trust seal, and write the time, crate number, and names of every witness across the flap. The second crate contained the iron evidence chest. Its lock had been forced. Inside, the modern blue fragment and Elowen's sealed needle case lay side by side beneath a warehouse skylight. Both had faded toward the same muddy violet. Sebastian stared at them for a long time. 20 minutes, Elowen said. You could have known before you signed. He did not defend himself. Fenwick sealed both objects separately and entered them in the customs register. The third crate should have contained the sapphire medallion. Instead, it held common bottle glass weighted with iron scraps. The true center of the window was missing. Daniel searched the loading desk and found the warehouse tally book. Entry H17 had been created 11 days before Elowen's accusation and 6 days before the medallion was officially reported stolen. The original order named Lady Honora Vale as principal and Giles Morrow as agent. It also listed a 4th package, marked H17C, transferred that afternoon directly to the Vesper's captain. Fenwick signed a certified extract, while Elowen sealed the original tally book in his presence. The fragile chain was complete. Ordinary twine observed at Ravensmere, the numbered crates followed by Daniel, ancient glass identified under customs supervision, and a warehouse record proving that Honora arranged shipment before the alleged theft. Sebastian read the date twice. She came to me the following morning, he said. She told me she had only just learned the medallion was missing, and you chose her certainty over my knowledge. I did. The admission was quiet and costly, only to the man speaking it. Elowen did not reward it. A crash sounded at the warehouse entrance. The outer doors swung open, and Morrow entered with a Hull magistrate's officer and 6 constables. In his hand was the accusation Sebastian had signed against Elowen, now accompanied by a warrant alleging that she had pursued stolen estate property to destroy the evidence. Fenwick protested, but the officer seized the tally book, the sealed glass packets, and the evidence chest under legal authority. Behind Morrow stood Lady Honora, travel dust upon her plum gown and triumph held tightly beneath control. "You should have remained in the dower house," she told Elowen. Then, while the constables placed the apparent proof inside a locked customs cabinet, smoke began curling through the floorboards beneath it. While the constables placed the apparent proof inside a locked customs cabinet, smoke began curling through the floorboards beneath it. Elowen smelled lamp oil before anyone saw flame. "Clear the warehouse!" she shouted. Morrow moved toward the cabinet instead of the door, but Fenwick caught his coat and demanded the key. The magistrate's officer searched his pockets, while orange fire burst between the planks. Honora stepped backward with perfect alarm. "The Duchess brought oil from her workshop," she said. "Search her carriage." Sebastian seized a water bucket and threw it across the burning floor, but the liquid only spread the oil beneath the cabinet. The trap had been designed to make rescue impossible without destroying the objects inside. A roof beam ignited, showering sparks across the iron crates. Elowen saw two warehouse boys trapped behind a fallen rack and ran toward them. "The evidence!" Sebastian shouted. "Men can testify," she answered. "Ash cannot raise children." She and Daniel dragged the boys beneath the rack, while Fenwick broke a side window. By the time everyone escaped, the customs cabinet glowed red inside the flames. Its papers, seals, packets, and tally book became one black mass. The roof collapsed before the fire brigade reached the quay. Across the water, the Vesper's sails rose against the night. The fourth package had already been carried aboard during the confusion, and the brig slipped toward the Humber before the harbour master received Sebastian's revocation. At the customs house an hour later, Honora presented her surviving inventory to the magistrate. According to that document, she had authorized only 3 crates, all carrying damaged estate glass for lawful valuation. No fourth package existed. Morrow swore that Elowen had followed the shipment to burn records proving her theft. The oil bottle discovered beneath Elowen's carriage seat bore the workshop mark. Ruth's statement remained at the dower house, but without the false glass or warehouse tally, it connected Morrow only to sabotage at Ravensmere, not Honora to the missing medallion. The magistrate ordered Elowen held in a private room until morning, when the creditors would assemble at Ravensmere to determine whether the estate accusation should proceed formally. Honora had lost a warehouse but destroyed the evidence against her, sent the sapphire medallion beyond the harbour, and placed Elowen under guard. She appeared to have won. Sebastian stood before the magistrate's desk and removed his ducal signet. "The accusation against my wife cannot proceed upon my statement." Honora turned sharply. "Sebastian, consider what you are surrendering." "I have considered too little." He told the magistrate that he had signed without reading the final page, refused a controlled test requiring only sunlight, authorized removal after Elowen warned him of structural collapse, and gave Honora custody, despite knowing Mercer and Blythe had supplied the glass used to fabricate the fragment. He admitted that both blue pieces changed color together before Fenwick, and that the chapel fell because of the authority he granted. Then he offered his unentailed London house and personal investments as security for the estate losses, and consented to temporary receivership over Ravensmere's private revenues until the creditors completed their inquiry. The confession cost him control, property, and the political appointment he had expected that winter. It did not restore Elowen's name. "You have spoken the truth after falsehood became expensive," she said, when the guard allowed him into her room. "Do not mistake that for repairing what you did." "I do not." He placed the signet on the table between them. "Tell me what remains." At first, Elowen believed nothing remained. The certified extract, glass fragments, color test, and custody seals had all burned. Fenwick could testify, but Honora would call him mistaken amid smoke and confusion. Then Elowen remembered the wooden tally hanging from the first crate at Ravensmere, H17, tied with blue and white twine used for imported cobalt. Mercer and Blythe numbered cargo lots when they entered the warehouse, not when they departed. Each lot received a weight ticket because cobalt was sold by the pound, and Elowen had complained 8 months earlier that shipments arrived underweight. Complaints were not kept in the warehouse tally book. They were copied into the purchaser's accounts and the carrier's weighbridge counterfoils. The glasshouse wage books at the Dower House contained Elowen's original letter rejecting lot H17. Its date was 11 days before the accusation, the same date Fenwick had seen in the burned tally book. More importantly, the letter recorded 4 packages in that lot, not 3. 3 sacks of cobalt and 1 sealed sample case marked H17C. Honora's supposed 4th parcel had not been invented for export. She had reused the identity of a sample case that legally entered Ravensmere weeks earlier, allowing it to leave Hull without appearing as newly declared estate property. Her inventory says there were only 3 crates tonight, Elowen said. The Vespers manifest says 4 packages, and the carrier's counterfoil will show that H17C originally travelled from Hull to Ravensmere before the medallion disappeared. Sebastian understood slowly. If she denies knowing the 4th mark, the carrier's records contradict her. If she admits knowing it, she must explain why she omitted it from the inventory you authorized. Elowen stood and asked Fenwick to send 2 officers to secure the weighbridge records before Morrow could reach them. She then dictated a message summoning Ruth, Mrs. Bell, Daniel, the workshop books, and the original H17 complaint to the creditors' meeting. Honora believed the fire had destroyed every question she could not answer. Elowen would not accuse her immediately. She would first ask Honora, before the creditors and magistrate, to identify exactly how many H17 packages existed, and force her to choose which verifiable record she wished to contradict. Elowen would first ask Honora, before the creditors and magistrate, to identify exactly how many H17 packages existed, and force her to choose which verifiable record she wished to contradict. By 10 the next morning, Ravensmere's great hall had become a creditor's chamber. Mr. Harland presided at the long table with the magistrate beside him, while landowners, tenants, workshop women, and servants filled the benches. Ruth remained between Mrs. Bell and Daniel, with 2 independent constables guarding the copied statements and workshop accounts. The original H17 complaint lay sealed before the magistrate. Sebastian sat apart from the creditors without his signet, no longer permitted to direct the estate inquiry. Honora attacked first. She described Elowen as an ambitious tradesman's daughter who had concealed workshop profits, copied her husband's signature, removed the sapphire medallion, and then burned the Hull warehouse when her crime was discovered. Morrow swore that the oil beneath the customs cabinet came from Elowen's glasshouse, and that no shipment had been planned until after the theft. Honora placed her surviving inventory on the table. 3 crates, she said. Every item was damaged outer glass. The Duchess invented a 4th package because the first 3 contained nothing that could vindicate her. Elowen rose without looking towards Sebastian. When did you first learn the medallion was missing? On the morning of the 6th. When did you contact Mercer and Blythe? After His Grace authorized valuation. On the 8th? Yes. Elowen asked the magistrate to open her sealed complaint letter. It was dated 11 days before the accusation and addressed to Mercer and Blythe regarding underweight cobalt lot H17. Mrs. Bell testified that she had copied the letter in Elowen's rooms. Daniel identified the estate carrier who delivered it. The workshop receipt bore a dated York postmark and listed 4 packages, 3 cobalt sacks and 1 sample case, H17C. Honora recovered quickly. Then the Duchess herself proves the mark belonged to her business. She could have reused it for any purpose. I did not possess the crates, Elowen replied. They arrived at Ravensmere under your order. Honora denied it. Fenwick then described seeing the burned warehouse tally record, which named Honora as principal and Morrow as agent, before the medallion was reported missing. Honora called his memory unreliable after the fire, Elowen allowed the objection to stand. "Mr. Morrow, did you enter the glass house on the night before the furnace failed?" "No." Ruth rose, voice shaking but audible. She testified that she saw him seal the flue, remove the sack of discarded blue glass, and threaten her children's home. Morrow accused her of accepting money from Elowen's trust. Ruth answered by producing wage records showing that her pay had not changed in 14 months. "I was silent because you frightened me," she said. "I speak because her grace made silence safe." Elowen next placed the chapel survey beside Honora's original dealer receipt. The receipt described a circular blue medallion 14 inches across. The certified survey described an 8-pointed star measuring 22 inches. "The object supposedly sold in London was manufactured from my rejected manganese glass," Elowen said. The receipt never described the Ravensmere medallion, because the true medallion had not yet been removed when the false sale was arranged. Honora claimed the dealer's clerk had erred, then explained how a clerk estimated an object he never possessed. Elowen turned to Morrow. "You took my glass from behind the kiln, commissioned a circular imitation, and gave its fragment to Lady Honora. You then blocked the furnace to destroy any remaining batch that could match it." "You have no fragment," Morrow said. "You burned it." The answer came too quickly. Silence moved through the hall. Elowen had never accused Morrow of setting the fire. She had only said the evidence burned, yet he had revealed that he knew the fragment was inside the customs cabinet. Honora interrupted before the magistrate could question him. Everyone in Hull knew where the evidence had been placed. "You were in the warehouse," Elowen said. "You saw the cabinet. Mr. Morrow arrived only after the constables seized it, and the officer kept him at the entrance, unless someone told him which objects the cabinet contained." Morrow's face lost color. Honora remained composed. "Speculation cannot restore a burned record." "No," Elowen agreed. "Wait can." 2 Hull officers entered carrying the carrier's Weybridge counterfoils, secured before Morrow's men reached the office. The inbound record showed H-17C weighing 12 pounds when it travelled from Hull to Ravensmere. The outbound record showed the same marked case weighing 46 pounds when it returned to Blackwater Quay. Elowen explained that an 8-pointed glass medallion of the survey's dimensions, with its lead border and protective packing, would add almost exactly 34 pounds. Honora insisted the difference could be iron scrap. "Then you acknowledge the 4th package?" Elowen asked. Honora saw the trap too late. "I acknowledge only that a case may have existed. I never authorized it, never handled it, and never knew what was inside." The hall doors opened once more. A customs lieutenant entered with seawater dried across his coat. The harbor cutter had overtaken the Vesper near Spurn and removed H-17C before the brig reached open sea. Behind him, 2 officers carried a sealed wooden case, bound with faded blue and white twine. Its shipping order bore Honora's private wax seal. Elowen did not touch it. She asked the magistrate to compare that seal with the one on Honora's inventory before anyone opened the lid. Elowen asked the magistrate to compare Honora's seal with the one on her inventory before anyone opened the lid. The 2 impressions matched in every detail: the narrow crescent beneath the V, the damaged pearl along the border, and the shallow cut left when Honora's seal had once struck stone. The customs lieutenant broke the shipping cord. Inside the padded case lay the 8-pointed sapphire medallion, its ancient lead border still bearing fresh tool marks where it had been torn from the chapel frame. Elowen identified 3 seed bubbles recorded in the previous autumn survey, and a tiny crown scratched into the lower lead by an unknown glazier centuries earlier. The medallion belonged to Ravensmere, and Honora's private seal had authorized its removal. Dismissal became doubt, doubt became silence, and silence hardened into recognition. Honora claimed Morrow had used her seal without permission, but the magistrate opened the loan agreement Sebastian had signed. Its unread final page appointed Honora managing receiver of Ravensmere's private rents if the £6,000 advance failed. It also granted Blythe the right to dispose of pledged contents without further permission. Mr. Harland compared those terms with the estate accounts. For 2 years, Morrow had recorded tenant rents as late or unpaid, although Daniel's carrier books proved the money arrived on time. The missing sums had created the appearance of imminent ruin, making Honora's loan seem like Ravensmere's only salvation. Elowen's workshop was the obstacle. Its independent accounts recorded local purchases, rent payments, and advances to the estate, exposing shortages Morrow could not explain. Honora, therefore, used Lot H17 to bring the tools of the conspiracy into Ravensmere. Morrow recovered Elowen's discarded manganese glass, commissioned the circular imitation described in the false London receipt, and removed a fragment to accuse her. He blocked the furnace flue to destroy the remaining batch, while Honora used Sebastian's fear of bankruptcy and wounded pride to obtain control of the house. Once Sebastian banished Elowen and signed the shipment authority, they dismantled the true window, hid its sapphire center inside H17C, and planned to export it through Blythe. The warehouse fire was intended to destroy the tally book, the unstable fragments, and every record linking the fourth package to Honora. Morrow's knowledge of the customs cabinet, the workshop oil found beneath it, Ruth's testimony, the shipping seal, and the recovered medallion formed a chain no confession was needed to complete. Honora and Morrow were taken before the county justices for committal on charges arising from fraud, theft, malicious destruction, witness intimidation, and the hull fire. Warrants were issued for Blythe and the glazier who made the imitation. Mercer's legitimate partners surrendered the diverted funds identified in their books, while Honora's private property was restrained pending claims from Ravensmere and the injured labourer. The magistrate then declared that no evidence supported the accusation against Elowen. Mr. Harland entered the correction into the creditor's record, and Sebastian rose before the same servants, tenants, and landowners who had witnessed his wife's humiliation. I accused the Duchess of Ravensmere without examining what she placed before me, he said. I chose fear over inquiry, pride over her knowledge, and another woman's certainty over my wife's right to be heard. I removed her authority, endangered her workers, enabled the theft of my family's property, and signed the order that brought down the chapel wall. Lady Honora deceived me, but she did not move my hand. Those choices were mine. He withdrew every restriction against Elowen, corrected the accusation in writing, and accepted personal liability for the chapel damage. His London house, hunting stable, and private investments were sold to meet the unpaid interest, restore the tenants' allowances, compensate the injured labourer, and repay Elowen's trust. Ravensmere remained under independent receivership for 3 years, and Sebastian lost the political appointment he had expected. Elowen's restoration came first. The dower house and its surrounding acres were conveyed to trustees for her separate use. The glass house received a perpetual lease that no duke could cancel, and every workshop woman received written protection for wages and tenancy. Elowen was appointed sole director of the rebuilding contract and paid at the same professional rate as any master glazier. Sebastian asked for neither forgiveness nor her return. They lived apart. He wrote once each month and never entered the glass house without invitation. Elowen answered only when she chose. 6 months later, the restored sapphire star was raised into the chapel's new stone frame, while 32 workshop women watched from the nave. Sebastian stood among the tenants rather than beside her. Afterward, he brought Elowen the final deed for the expanded glass school. Unlike the accusation he had signed without reading, she examined every page, corrected 2 clauses, and made him wait while her trustee reviewed the rest. Only then did she sign. Is this forgiveness? Sebastian asked quietly. No, Elowen said. It is an honest beginning. What becomes of it will be decided by what you do when no one is watching. She took the deed to the independent glasshouse, hung its brass key at her own waist, and opened the doors. Morning light passed through the women's finished panes in blue, crimson and gold, as Elowen stepped inside and turned the key behind her.